Okay, so we're making good progress on our clone. So far, we've pretty much covered the top bar at the top. So our challenge in this video is going to be to recreate the dark and lighter red section of the header here. Now you can see that we've got the red and darker red bars extend right to the edge of the screen, whereas the content has the same width as before. So we're going to need an outer div which has a width of the whole screen, and then an inner div which has a width the same as the top bar that we created up there. So that should be pretty straightforward. It would definitely be worth clearing our floats to make sure that everything appears below the top bar here. So let's have a special div to clear everything. We're probably going to be using that more than once. So I'll create it as a class, and we just want to clear both floats. Not that we've got any right floats at the moment. And then I'm going to call this the menu bar, for lack of a better phrase. So I'm going to start with an ID of menu bar container. So this is going to be the full width div for this lighter red background. So let's just try and get our red color first off. That looks good. And then, what did I call it? Menu bar container. There we go. So we want a background color of that and a width of 100%. Let's have a look. Oh, we could do with a height as well. Let's try 100 pixels to start off. That's better. Okay, so we're looking pretty good already. In terms of height, I think that's a little bit high for just that top part there. So let's go for something like 70 pixels. Great. Then we're going to need our top bar, our menu bar, sorry, div to go within that. And that's going to be pretty similar, but we want it centered and to have a width the same as the top bar at the top. So let's go right back. Remember, we had 1000 pixels and a margin of 0 auto, which should give us the layout that we want and make it nice and centered as well. So in terms of content, we would just want the word news there. So I think I'm going to use an H1 for this. There we go. So the text is there. Got some strange padding coming in, and we definitely need a little bit of styling as well. Now, we're only going to have one H1 on our page, so we don't need to give it a class or an ID. I think we definitely want to take away any padding or margins. So let's set padding and margins to 0 for now. We might want to put some back in again. We definitely want it to be white. And I think we want it to be a little bit larger than it is now. So let's try a font size of 40 pixels. See how that looks. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we actually don't want it to be bold. So let's set the font weight to be normal. Great, that's looking better. It's not quite the same font, but it's close enough. But we do want a little bit of a margin at the top, I think. So we'll set margin top be, that's too much. Maybe 10 pixels. Let's have a look. Now that's moved down the whole bar, which is not what we want. So let's switch that to a padding at the top. That's better. Okay. That's pretty good. Pretty close to what we've got there in the real thing. Fantastic. So now we just need to have our find local news link and that image there. I wonder if I can get it. No, not easily. Okay, so while I'm here, I'll do my screenshotting trick. And then let's jump over and copy that image. I'll call it a pointer. There's probably a better name for it, but that will do. Copy it into our images folder. Great. Okay. So we want a little box there and a link inside with our image to the right of it. So I think I'll use a div for that. Pop it after news, but this is going to be inside menu bar. So div ID equals, and let's remind ourselves what it actually says. Find local news. So let's call this local news. And the text, before I forget it, is going to be find local news. Let me just check the capitalization. Oh, all lower text, all lowercase, I mean, at the beginning. And then we're going to want our image. And I called it pointer. Okay. Let's have a quick look and see what that looks like with no styling at all. Needs a bit of work. All right, no problem though, we can handle this. So first off, we need to get that H1 to float left. In fact, we could possibly do without that, because what we're going to do now is get our div, which was called local-news. And we'll get that to float right. There it is. So we don't actually need this to float left. It's not going to cause any problems, but let's get rid of it. Always good to keep the code simple. So I'm actually going to just get rid of the float right temporarily so that I can see what I'm working with here. I have to make the browser window bigger and smaller every time. But in terms of, we want it white, quite large, and centered with a small grey box around it. So let's have color white. We do want it to be a link as well. So a href. I'll just leave it blank in terms of its destination. Not too worried about where it goes. Close that there. Now that's good, but it hasn't made our link white. And we're going to access that by using local-news and then a. And that will then style all the links within local news. So if we now have a look at that, we don't actually need that style. And there we go. So it is white, but I'm just going to temporarily pop back my float left into the H1 so that I can see it all there. That'll make it a lot easier to develop. Okay, we want to get rid of that underline. So text decoration none, but we want to bring it back in on hover. So local news A and then the hover pseudo class as we've seen before. Bring back the underline. So let's have a look at that. Lovely. All right, we need it a little bit bigger. So let's try a font size of 15 pixels. Ooh, too small. 25 pixels. Ooh. Don't forget pixels. There we go, a little big. Maybe I was right all along with my 15. No, that is definitely too small. Somewhere in between. 20, that looks about right. All right, now the link is definitely a little bit low down. So let's use a bit of positioning to move it back up again. So relative positioning, and then we'll set the top to, let's try out minus 20 pixels. That'll move it upwards. Okay, that looks pretty good, but let's try maybe 17. I like that, that looks more centered. Brilliant. And now let's style the image. We just need to make that a bit smaller really, and possibly change the position. We could give the image a particular ID, but slightly more fancy would be to take our local dash news and then style all the images within it. And there's only one, so that saves us having to create another ID for our pointer there. So let's change the height to be, let's try 20 pixels. It's a little small. This has affected our link as well. So we probably won't need our relative positioning there. That's interesting. So let's use 30 pixels instead. Still a little small maybe. Let's go for 40. Okay, brilliant. So I think that's about the right size. Find local news is now a little bit out of whack. So let's move it down a touch, not that much. We want it to be roughly centered with the image. So about that should do. And then we want our box round the find local news. Which should be fine. Let me see if I can get that color just right. I'm not finding my color picker to work that well at the moment, but let's see what we can do. So there's the dark red. And that, I think, is the lighter red. Let's give it a go. So let's set the local news div to have a border of 1 pixel, that color, solid. Okay. That's about the right color, I think, but it's definitely extended further than we'd want there. Let's have a look and find out why. I think it's because we need to introduce our float. So let's now float. Well, let's see if we can get away with floating left temporarily. And we'll want to set a fixed width as well. So let's go for something like 200 pixels. Okay, good. So that now gets the border roughly how we want it. The width is a little bit wide. So let's go for 180 pixels. Great. I think we need a little bit of padding on the left and right, and maybe a touch on the top to bring it down a little as well. So let's go for 5 pixels at the top, and then 5 pixels on the right. Let's try 0 on the bottom and see what effect that has, and then 5 pixels on the left as well. Okay, I'm liking that. I think maybe a touch more on the left. Let's try 10 pixels. Excellent. I think that looks good. Now all we need to do is bring it down a little. So we'll do that with a margin. So at the top, let's try 5 pixels again. And then we're going to want a margin right of, let's try around 10 pixels. And we're not actually interested in bottom and left margins because we're going to float it to the right. Okay, let's have a look. There it is. Fantastic. So it's not identical to that, but it's pretty close. I think we can make the text a little bigger, and it'd be nice to align the bottom of the text with the bottom of that image there as well as it is here. So let's just do a little bit of playing around with that. if we can, we'll float it left again so that we can see it more clearly. There we go. So we want the font size to be maybe 60 pixels. If that's not too much. Oop, that's the wrong one. Font size, let's try 30. That's a little large. 26. Okay, I think that looks about right. We'll then need to increase the width. Let's try 190, it's too narrow. 200, still too narrow. 210, still too narrow. 220. Excellent. That's better. Now that I can see it there, I think I want it even bigger. So let's go for 30 and 240. 250. There we go. Okay, so that looks good. Maybe we don't need to move it up at all anymore. Let's have a look. Maybe it will position itself. No, it's still too low down without that repositioning. So let's try moving it up 5 pixels, a little bit more, 8 pixels maybe. There we go. Excellent. I like that. So let's just change the float from left to right. I think that looks pretty good. One thing that you may have noticed that we're lacking though is this grey bar here, which adds a nice border between the top bar, as we're calling it, and the top bit of the menu bar here. So let's add that in. And we also need to make sure our lines line up with that. So this is where it comes in. It has to be pretty pixel perfect. So we can use our local news container, I think, for this, or our menu bar container, sorry. And we'll give it a border top of 1px solid, and we definitely have that color already because we used it on the left of the top bar menu. So where's the border left? There we go. That's what we want. So let's pop it there. Notice it doesn't actually matter what order we put these three in. You can put the width and the type and the color in any order you like, and it'll still work it out. Great, so now the bar is there, which looks really nice, but those things aren't quite in contact with it. So let's figure out why that is. First thing to try might be to decrease the height of the top bar slightly, which might move everything up. Nope, that's no good. So let's keep that at 40. Let's just try setting the margin and padding to 0. No, that's not it either. So I suspect that it's something to do with one of these divs being taller than the rest. And the only one that doesn't have a left margin is this bell one, because that's got the image as the left margin. So let's just test out our theory by removing the bell div temporarily. Aha, now that moves everything up beautifully. Okay, so the bell div is definitely our problem. Let's have a look. Probably that's a little bit too tall. Okay, we've got our margin here. So 9 pixels, 8 pixels. All right, so let's try changing the bottom margin to 0. And we'll keep the left margin at 8 pixels. See if that does the job. There we go. Very nice. So now everything links up beautifully, and things are really starting to take shape. Great. So now let's have a look at this menu bar down here. So that's what we're trying to create next. You can see first off that it's got a different red to the bar above. So let's just get that red copied to the clipboard. and create some new divs for us. So we're now outside the menu bar. I'm actually going to call this very unoriginally menu bar 2. And then add some styles for menu bar 2. And the main one is that we want the background color to be that. But we also want it to have a width of 100%. And that's actually not menu bar 2, it's menu bar 2 container. Just like we had before. So we'll set that to be menu bar 2 container, and then within that we're going to have div id menu bar 2. And this is where our menu will be contained. And all we'll need for that is a width of 1000 pixels and a margin, as we've seen before, of 0 and auto. And that will give it a margin 0 top and bottom, but auto left and right, which will make it nicely centered for us. And let's give it a height as well. So let's try something like 30 pixels. All right, let's take a look. Aha! So everything's good, except it's not quite positioned where we wanted it. Why is that? It's because we haven't broken our floats. So before that, let's add a div with a class of clear. And that should clear both our floats and move it down underneath where it belongs. Brilliant. So now we're going to want a string of links, all of which are going to be styled the same. So I'll start with the first couple, home and UK, and once we've got those right, we should just be able to add the others in. So we want them pretty big, white, and we want to have this border there as well. So let's have an A. Again, we'll have a blank href, and this will be home. And then the same for the next link, which I've forgotten already, UK. There we go. So let's see what they look like without any styling. All right, not great. So again, we can style these using menu bar 2 and then A, and that will style all of the links within menu bar 2 the same. So let's set the color to white first, and we want no underline, so text decoration none. We want a bit of a margin at the top. Let's try 5px. And we want some padding left and right as well. So we don't need any padding top and bottom, but let's go for 10 pixels padding on the left and right. And finally, let's add our border right. It's going to be 1px solid. And I think it's the same color as the border around the bit that we can't see anymore. Find local news there. Or at least it's close enough. So let's use the same border as we did for local news, which was this one. BB4545. Okay, let's take a look. That's not bad. I think they could do with being slightly bigger. And my margin top obviously hasn't worked out there. So I'm going to use font size. Let's try 14 pixels. And let's use positioning to shift them down a bit. Okay, that's actually made them smaller. Let's try 18 pixels. Okay, I think that's about the right size. And I think we could make the menu bar itself a little bit bigger and then move them down a little bit more. There we go. I like that. Maybe a teensy bit less. Okay, great. So I'm pretty happy with that. There's something slightly strange going on with the padding here, I think. But let's add a few more and it might become clearer what that issue is. So we've got, I wonder if I can copy and paste. No. Okay, no problem. Let's just add them in. So I'll just add a few blank links there. So we've got world, business, politics, tech, science, health, education, entertainment and arts, video and audio, and more. Okay, let's take a look. We'll sort out the more triangle later on. Okay, so this is good. We have a problem with our font size, so let's make that font a little bit smaller. That's easy enough. Try 16, still a little bit too big. So let's try 14. Okay, that's about right. And then let's move them down a little. Keep them centered. Whoops, wrong way. 1 pixel less, I think. Great. Now I'm going to bring in the underline on hover, which I know is not quite the same as what the BBC site does, but it'll be close enough. There we go. We need JavaScript to get this to appear anyway. All right. So all we need to really do now is add the down arrow. And of course, we want to get rid of this margin on the more link. So let's do both of those. First off, I'll do my screenshot. And remember, you can use the clipper tool if you're on Windows to do that, or Command-Shift-4 if you're on Mac. And there it is. So I'm going to call it down arrow and then copy it and put it in the images folder as before. Brilliant. So let's edit that. First off, we're going to need to get rid of the border on the final more link. So let's give that a special class, which I'll call no border. And then we can have a no border class, which has border none. So let's just have a look, see if that's worked for us. It hasn't. That allows us to use a special trick of exclamation mark and important. And let's just make sure you can see that that's worked. So that's a really handy little trick that you can use when you've got potentially clashing CSS instructions. So here we're telling every menu bar 2A item to have a border on the right, and here we're telling everything with a class of no border to have no border. So how does the browser know which one to do? If you want to be completely clear on it, then you use exclamation mark and important, and it will make sure that this one has a priority over anything which is not important. So that's a handy little trick. Okay, that's great. And so all that remains then for this bar is to add in our image. So images and then down arrow. There we go, right, a little bit too large. So let's give it an ID of down arrow. And then we can fix all of that. All right, so it's there. It's a little large, little high up there. And it's shifted everything down as well. So let's try a height of 10 pixels. And let's shift it down a little bit using positioning. So we'll give it a top of, let's try 10 pixels as well. Just see what that looks like. Oh, as it happens, that looks pretty perfect. I like that a lot. Wonderful. So that's our menu bar complete. In the next video then, we'll go and look at the left part of the main section here. So we'll do our technology link up there, and then we'll have a bit of content and our Asda image right there as well. Hope you're still enjoying yourself and you're staying with me. I'll see you in the next video.